I felt him before I saw him. Conversations did not stop exactly, but they softened, like the room itself had taken a careful breath. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Heads turned in one subtle wave that began near the ballroom doors and rolled outward until even the guests at table 19 were glancing over my shoulder. I shifted Noah higher in my arms and looked up. 4 men entered first, each wearing black tuxedos cut so precisely they looked poured onto them. They moved with quiet efficiency, scanning the room without seeming obvious about it. Then the man they were protecting stepped through the doorway, and every instinct I had spent years sharpening as a single mother told me that this was someone used to being obeyed. He was tall, at least 6'3", with dark hair brushed back from a face too striking to ignore. Strong jaw, straight nose, broad shoulders that filled his tuxedo as if it had been designed around him rather than the other way around. But it was his eyes that held me still. Green, cold at first glance, yet intensely focused, like they missed nothing. The bride's father hurried across the ballroom to greet him, nearly tripping over his own polished shoes. My stepfather, who rarely treated anyone as an equal, extended both hands and smiled with the nervous eagerness of a man trying to impress someone far more powerful than himself. "Who is that?" the woman beside me whispered to her husband. He leaned closer. "Dominic Romano." The name landed like a dropped glass. Even I had heard it, not from newspapers or television, but in the careful way adults lowered their voices when discussing men who seemed to own entire neighborhoods, hotels, restaurants, construction companies, charities, the kind of wealth that did not need to announce itself because everyone already knew. Dominic accepted greetings with a slight nod, his expression composed, almost unreadable. People moved around him the way water moves around stone, respectful, cautious, drawn in despite themselves. He should have remained near the front with the most important guests. Instead, his gaze drifted across the ballroom, past the chandeliers, past the dance floor, past tables covered in roses and crystal and expensive silverware. It stopped on me. My breath caught so sharply it hurt. Surely he was looking at someone behind me. I turned slightly. There was only a swinging service door and a waiter carrying a tray of coffee cups. When I looked back, those green eyes were still fixed on mine. Not on my dress. Not on the pity of my situation. On me. Noah stirred in his sleep, and I instinctively brushed his hair away from his forehead. Dominic's expression changed almost imperceptibly. The severity in his features softened for half a second, as if the sight of my son had reached some guarded place inside him. Then my ex-husband's voice cut through the music from across the room. "Emma, still sitting alone. I see." I turned toward the sound, but before I could answer, I felt Dominic Romano begin to walk in my direction. Some wounds do not leave scars. They leave timing so perfect, it feels cruel. Ethan Carter had always known exactly when to appear. He stood at the edge of table 19 with the same confident smile that had once convinced me he would be a good husband and a dependable father. Tonight that smile looked polished, practiced, and completely empty. Beside him stood a woman I recognized from Noah's social media photos. Tall, elegant, and several years younger than me, with glossy dark hair and a champagne-colored dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. A diamond ring flashed on her left hand every time she tucked her hair behind her ear. Ethan slipped his arm around her waist and looked down at me as if he were checking on an old investment that had failed to perform. Emma, he said, drawing out my name. I did not realize Olivia actually invited you. The woman laughed softly, covering her mouth with manicured fingers. Ethan said you usually avoid family events. I adjusted Noah against my shoulder, refusing to let my embarrassment show. Good evening, Ethan. He glanced at our son as if Noah were an afterthought rather than the little boy who waited by the window every other weekend, hoping his father would arrive on time. He's asleep already, Ethan asked. Long day, Hanchamsnom. Second grade field trip, then a 2-hour drive to get here. That sounds exhausting, his fiancée said, though her tone suggested she found my life more fascinating than admirable. Ethan straightened his tuxedo jacket. You know, Emma, if you had accepted my settlement offer, things would be easier for you by now. I felt heat rise to my face. He was referring to the documents his attorney had sent last month suggesting reduced child support in exchange for dropping certain visitation obligations. Practical, he called it. Efficient. As if our son were a line item in a budget. We are not discussing that tonight, I said quietly. Ethan gave me a pitying smile, still stubborn. He looked around the ballroom, taking in my seat near the kitchen doors, my clearance rack dress, the sleeping child in my arms. But I suppose that is why you are here alone. The words landed harder than I expected. Around us, several relatives pretended not to listen while missing none of it. My cousin Melissa lowered her eyes into her wine glass. My mother stood 20 feet away and did nothing. Ethan's fiancée tilted her head. Well, not everyone gets a second chance. Ethan chuckled. Let us be honest, Emma. Some people are simply better at being chosen. For one terrible second, I believed him. I saw myself through his eyes. The tired single mother in the back of the room. The woman whose husband left when Noah was 3. The sister tolerated rather than celebrated. My fingers tightened around my son's small body. Noah stirred, murmuring in his sleep, and I swallowed the ache in my throat. Mommy, he whispered. I am here, sweetheart. Ethan exhaled through his nose. This is exactly what I mean. Then a deep voice behind him cut through the air with perfect calm. I believe you are standing in my wife's way. The room went so quiet, I could hear the crystal beads on my mother's necklace click together when she turned. Ethan's confident smile vanished first. Then the color drained from his face with startling speed, as if someone had pulled a curtain and revealed what lay behind it. I looked up slowly. Dominic Romano stood beside my chair, close enough that I caught the clean scent of cedar and expensive cologne. Up close, he seemed even taller. The ballroom lights reflected off the black silk lapels of his tuxedo. But there was nothing flashy about him. He did not need attention. He simply commanded it. His hand rested lightly on the back of my chair, not touching me yet somehow making me feel more protected than I had in years. Ethan recovered enough to laugh, though the sound came out thin and strained. I am sorry, he said. There must be some misunderstanding. Dominic's expression did not change. I do not believe there is. His voice was low and perfectly controlled, the kind of voice that never needed to rise because people leaned in to hear it. He shifted his gaze to me, and the severity in his eyes softened just enough to make my pulse stumble. Emma, The way he said my name felt strangely intimate, as if he had known it longer than a few seconds. Before I could speak, Noah stirred in my arms. Dominic's attention dropped to my son. His features gentled in a way that seemed almost impossible on a face carved from such restraint. "You must be Noah." My son blinked sleepily and nodded against my shoulder. "Hi." Dominic's mouth curved into the faintest smile. "Hi, Noah." Then he turned to Ethan once more. "You were standing in my wife's way." The word hit me harder the second time. Wife. My mother gasped softly. My cousin Melissa nearly spilled her wine. Across the ballroom, even Olivia stopped mid-dance, staring at us in disbelief. Ethan's fiancée looked from Dominic to me with wide eyes. "Emma," Ethan said, his voice suddenly urgent. What is this?" I should have denied it. I should have stood up and explained that I had never met Dominic Romano before tonight. But Ethan's earlier words still echoed in my chest. Some people are simply better at being chosen. For the first time in years, someone powerful had looked at me as if I were worth claiming in front of an entire room. Dominic extended his hand to me, palm up, his expression calm but unwavering. He was giving me a choice, not demanding, not pressuring, waiting. My heart pounded so loudly I was certain everyone could hear it. Slowly, I shifted Noah to one arm and placed my free hand in his. His fingers closed around mine with steady warmth. Dominic drew me gently to my feet. With his other hand, he adjusted Noah's position with surprising care, making sure my son was secure before his hand settled at the small of my back. The gesture was protective, not possessive. "There you are," he said softly enough that only I could hear. "I was wondering how long you planned to let him speak to you that way." I stared up at him, speechless. Dominic looked back at Ethan, his expression once again unreadable. "The lady is with me." And just like that, for the first time in a very long time, I did not feel like the woman in the back of the room anymore. There are moments when your life splits in two so quietly that nobody else notices. One version of me was still standing at table 19 in a clearance rack dress, waiting for the humiliation to continue. The other was walking across the ballroom with Dominic Romano's hand wrapped around mine, feeling every eye in the room follow us. His palm was warm and steady. Mine was trembling. Noah had fully awakened now, his small arms around my neck, his blue eyes blinking as he took in the glittering chandeliers and the tall stranger beside us. "Mommy," he whispered, loud enough for only me to hear. "Is that your friend?" Before I could answer, Dominic looked up at him. "I hope so." Noah studied him with the serious expression children wear when they are deciding whether an adult can be trusted. "You are very tall," he announced. Dominic's mouth curved into a genuine smile. "That is what I have been told." Noah nodded as if this confirmed something important. "I like your tie." "Thank you, Noah. I like your bow tie too." The tension in my chest loosened just enough for me to breathe. Dominic guided us to the center of the ballroom where the bride and groom's parents stood greeting special guests. My mother straightened her shoulders and put on the same brittle smile she used for church photographs. "Emma," she said carefully, "you did not mention you were bringing company." Dominic answered before I could. "That was my oversight." His tone was polite, but it carried the unmistakable confidence of a man unaccustomed to being questioned. He extended his hand to my mother. "Dominic Romano, it is a pleasure to finally meet Emma's family." Finally. The word hung in the air with deliberate precision, suggesting a history that did not exist and yet felt oddly convincing. My mother's expression changed from suspicion to something close to awe. "Mr. Romano, we are honored you could attend." Dominic's gaze flicked briefly to me. I would not have missed it. "Chica," Olivia approached, still holding up the hem of her wedding gown. "Emma," she breathed, eyes wide. Then she turned to Dominic. "Thank you for coming. Congratulations," he said. He reached into his jacket and handed her a cream-colored envelope. Whatever was inside made my new brother-in-law go completely silent. Olivia's eyes filled with tears. "This is too generous." Dominic inclined his head. "Your sister deserves to be celebrated tonight." No one had spoken about me with that kind of certainty in years. A server passed with a tray of sparkling cider and champagne. Dominic selected a glass of cider and handed it to me instead of champagne without asking whether I was drinking. The small consideration felt absurdly intimate. He noticed things. "What are you doing?" I whispered when everyone turned away to admire Olivia's gift. Dominic leaned closer, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "Helping you get through the evening." Why, for the first time, his composure shifted. Not much. Just a flicker of honesty in those striking green eyes. "Because you looked like someone who has spent too many years pretending she does not deserve better." My throat tightened. Before I could respond, Dominic offered his arm. "Stay with me until the night is over." "Emma." His eyes held mine with quiet intensity. Let them see exactly what they failed to appreciate. The most dangerous thing Dominic Romano did that night was not claiming me in front of 200 people. It was noticing what I needed before I said a word. We spent the next hour moving through the reception, as if we had been doing this for years. His hand remained at the small of my back, steady and reassuring, not possessive, protective. Every introduction followed the same pattern. People who had barely acknowledged me for years suddenly smiled too brightly and asked about my work, my son, my life. Dominic answered some questions for me and redirected others with effortless grace. He never left me stranded in uncomfortable silence. He never let anyone speak over me. And somehow, with nothing more than his presence, he turned me from an afterthought into someone worth listening to. Noah adjusted to the change even faster than I did. When the band began playing louder music, Dominic crouched to Noah's eye level and asked whether he liked chocolate cake. Noah nodded with enthusiastic seriousness. 5 minutes later, one of Dominic's associates appeared carrying a plate with an extra slice and a glass of milk. Noah beamed. "How did you know that is my favorite?" Dominic straightened his tiny bow tie. "A good man pays attention." The words were simple, but they hit me harder than they should have. Ethan had forgotten Noah's food allergies twice. He once showed up to a school concert on the wrong date. Yet this man, a stranger, had noticed my son's exhaustion, his appetite, and the way he needed reassurance in unfamiliar places. Dominic sat beside Noah at our table while I finally ate a warm meal. He asked my son about second grade, dinosaurs, and his dream of becoming an architect so he could design a treehouse with a secret reading room. Dominic listened as if every detail mattered. "Can it have a drawbridge?" Noah asked. Dominic considered the question with complete seriousness. Every worthwhile structure should have one. Noah giggled so loudly that several guests turned to look. I had not heard that sound from him in weeks. My chest tightened with a feeling dangerously close to hope. Later, when the music softened and the lights dimmed, Dominic led me to the edge of the dance floor. "One dance," he said quietly. "Only if you want to." I hesitated. "I am not very good at this." "Neither am I," he replied, though I suspected he was good at nearly everything he attempted. Noah was happily building a tower from breadsticks with one of Dominic's security men, who appeared unexpectedly talented with children. I let Dominic take my hand. He drew me into a slow, respectful embrace, his movements controlled and unhurried. There was no pressure, no performance, just warmth and the steady rhythm of his breathing. "You can stop looking so worried," he murmured. "I am not expecting anything from you." I looked up at him. "Then why are you doing all this?" The green in his eyes deepened under the amber lights. "Because your son watches you like you are his entire world." His voice dropped even lower. "And because a woman who carries that much by herself should never be treated as if she is invisible." My eyes burned. For years I had fought to prove I was enough. Enough mother, enough provider, enough woman. Dominic touched none of my carefully guarded walls, yet somehow he saw straight through them. When the song ended, I took a small step back. "Thank you," I whispered. Dominic's gaze held mine. "Emma, you do not owe me gratitude for treating you the way you should have been treated all along." The illusion of safety lasted until Ethan cornered me near the hallway outside the ballroom. It happened just after Noah fell asleep again, curled on a velvet love seat in the lounge beside Dominic's head of security. A broad-shouldered man named Luca, who somehow knew how to tell dinosaur facts in a whisper. I had stepped into the corridor for a moment of quiet, hoping to steady the emotions Dominic had stirred in me. The hotel was hushed beyond the ballroom doors. Soft lighting reflected off polished marble. Somewhere in the distance, I heard the muffled sound of laughter and music. Then Ethan's voice stopped me cold. "You really think this changes anything?" He stood at the far end of the corridor, hands in his pockets, his tuxedo immaculate and his expression carefully controlled. But I knew him too well not to recognize the resentment beneath that calm surface. "I am not doing this tonight," I said. "No," he replied. "You are." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. I was trying to handle this privately. "Emma, but if you insist on making a spectacle of yourself, then perhaps you should hear what my attorney filed yesterday." My stomach tightened. "What are you talking about?" Ethan studied me with a look I once mistook for concern. "I am requesting expanded custody." For a moment, the world seemed to tilt. "You cannot be serious." "I am very serious." He glanced toward the lounge where Noah slept. "You are overworked. You are always tired. You barely make enough to stay afloat. Meanwhile, I have a stable home, substantial resources, and a fiancé who is eager to help." My hands turned ice cold. Noah is not a scheduling inconvenience you can optimize. This is about what is best for him. You do not even remember his teacher's name. Ethan's jaw tightened. And yet a judge may still conclude he would benefit from a more structured environment. I stared at him, unable to breathe. Every fear I had pushed aside came rushing back at once. The overdue bills, the long nights, the constant exhaustion, the terrifying knowledge that loving my son more than anything in the world did not guarantee I could protect him from a courtroom. Ethan took another step closer. "Think carefully. Emma, men like Dominic Romano do not stay. When he loses interest, you will be alone again." She will not be alone. Dominic's voice came from behind me, calm and unmistakable. I turned. He stood at the entrance to the corridor, one hand in his pocket, his expression unreadable, but his eyes were fixed on Ethan with a focus so precise it felt like a line drawn in stone. Dominic walked to my side and slipped his hand around mine. The contact was simple, yet the trembling in my fingers eased almost instantly. Ethan squared his shoulders. "This is a family matter." Dominic's tone remained polite. "Then you should have treated the mother of your child like family." Ethan opened his mouth, then thought better of it. Dominic did not raise his voice. He did not threaten. He merely stood beside me with such unshakable certainty that the balance of power shifted without another word. Ethan looked at me one last time. "This is not over." When he walked away, I realized I was shaking. Dominic turned toward me, his expression softening the moment Ethan disappeared. "Emma." My eyes filled with tears I had spent years refusing to shed. "He is trying to take Noah." Dominic lifted my hand to his chest, where his heartbeat was steady and strong beneath crisp white linen. "Then he has chosen the wrong woman to underestimate." Rain was falling by the time the reception ended. Fine. Silver rain that turned the city lights into watercolor streaks across the hotel windows. I stood beneath the covered entrance with Noah asleep in my arms and my emotions unraveling faster than I could hide them. Valets rushed through the drizzle. Guests hugged the bride and groom goodbye. My family surrounded Dominic as if he had always belonged to us, as if they had not spent years treating me like an obligation. He excused himself from them without hesitation and walked straight to me. "My car is waiting," he said. "Let me take you home." I should have refused. Accepting a ride from a man I had known for only a few hours was the kind of decision practical women did not make. But practical women were not standing in the rain with tears threatening to spill because their ex-husband wanted to take their child. Practical women had not just been seen, protected, and treated with more kindness in one evening than they had received in years. Dominic opened the rear door of a black sedan and held an umbrella over us so Noah would not get wet. Inside, the leather seats were warm and the cabin smelled faintly of cedar. Noah never woke as Dominic carefully buckled him into the booster seat that had somehow appeared in the car as if by magic. When Dominic slid in beside me, the city began moving past the windows in soft ribbons of light. For several blocks, neither of us spoke. I watched rain trace silver lines down the glass and tried to make sense of what had happened. Finally, I turned to him. "You did not have to do any of this." Dominic looked at me with that same unwavering intensity that had undone me all night. "I know." "Then why?" He exhaled slowly, as if choosing words he was not accustomed to saying aloud. "Because when I walked into that ballroom, I saw a woman carrying her sleeping son, while everyone around her acted as if she should apologize for existing." His gaze held mine, and I found that unacceptable. My throat tightened. "You do not even know me." "That is true." His voice softened. "But I know what dignity looks like. I know what devotion looks like. And I know when something precious is being taken for granted." The rain tapped gently against the roof. Noah slept peacefully behind us. The world inside that car felt strangely still, as if time itself had stepped back to let us breathe. Dominic reached into his jacket and removed a simple white business card. No title, no company name, just his name and a phone number embossed in dark green lettering. He placed it in my hand and closed my fingers around it. Tonight was never a game for me. Emma, my pulse quickened. What are you saying? His expression shifted, and for the first time, the invincible composure cracked just enough to reveal something profoundly human beneath it. Hope. I am saying that I would like to see you again. His eyes moved briefly to Noah in the back seat before returning to mine. Both of you. Tears blurred my vision. You said I was your wife for one night. Dominic's thumb brushed lightly over my knuckles. That was the only explanation the room would understand. His voice dropped to a near whisper. But the truth is, Emma, I have not been pretending since the moment I saw you. My breath caught. Outside, the rain continued to fall. Inside that quiet car, with my son sleeping safely behind us and Dominic Romano looking at me as if I were the answer to a question he had been asking for years. I realized the most frightening thing was not how powerful he was. It was how much I wanted to believe him. 1 year later, I stood in front of a mirror while Noah adjusted his bow tie with the concentration of a surgeon. He was 8 now, taller, steadier, and carrying the kind of happiness that made children seem to glow from the inside. "Does this look right?" he asked, tugging at the knot beneath his chin. I knelt to straighten it, smoothing the lapels of his tiny tuxedo. "Perfect." He grinned. "Dominic says every worthwhile structure needs a strong foundation." I laughed softly because that was exactly the kind of thing Dominic would say. Over the past 12 months, he had become the foundation beneath our lives in ways I never thought possible. He did not solve every problem with grand gestures, though there had been many of those. Instead, he showed up for school concerts, parent-teacher conferences, Saturday pancakes, bedtime stories delivered in a deep voice that made Noah fall asleep before the second chapter. When Ethan's custody petition reached court, Dominic sat beside me through every meeting with attorneys, never speaking over me, never taking control, simply reminding me that I was not fighting alone. The judge dismissed Ethan's request after reviewing the evidence and listening to Noah say, with heartbreaking honesty, that his home was wherever his mother was. Ethan still saw his son, but for the first time he understood that money alone could not replace presence. Dominic never asked Noah to call him anything other than Dominic. He earned every inch of trust slowly, with patience and consistency. The first time Noah shouted, "Look, Dad, honking," across a little league field, the surprise on Dominic's face was matched only by the tears in my eyes. He crouched to Noah's level and asked, very carefully, "Are you sure?" Noah nodded. "You stayed." Dominic hugged him with such reverence that I had to turn away for a moment to collect myself. Tonight, the ballroom looked different from the one where my life changed, though perhaps it was I who had changed. I was no longer hiding at the back of the room. My gown had been designed by a woman Dominic funded through a small business grant because he believed talent deserved opportunity. My family treated me with a respect that had once seemed impossible, but I no longer needed their approval to feel worthy. Olivia squeezed my hands before the ceremony. "I owe you an apology," she whispered, "for not seeing what you were carrying." I kissed her cheek. "We all see more clearly now." The doors opened, music rose. Noah took his place beside Dominic at the altar, proud and beaming. Dominic turned as I began walking toward him. He wore a black tuxedo, his green eyes brighter than I had ever seen them. Powerful men are often described as fearless, but when he looked at me that night, I saw something more meaningful than confidence. I saw gratitude, as if he still could not believe I had chosen him too. When I reached him, Dominic took my hands in his. 1 year ago, he said softly, I told a room full of strangers that you were my wife. His thumb brushed over my wedding ring. Tonight, I get to tell the truth. Noah sniffled loudly into a handkerchief much too large for his small hands. Laughter rippled through the room. Tears blurred my vision as the officiant spoke the words that made us a family in every possible sense. I arrived at that first wedding feeling invisible. I left with hope. And now, standing before the man who taught me that love is not about being rescued, but about being recognized, I understood something simple and life-changing. The right person does not choose you for one night. He chooses you and your child every single day.